Hi guys, Molton here. Welcome back to the speedrun series, and we're continuing on here, almost nearing 2200 mark. We'll play the move pawn to e4. So let's go for knight c3. So I think one of our viewers wanted to play the closed Sicilian, so we will try the closed Sicilian in this particular game. Generally speaking, the closed Sicilian is pretty harmless for black, but the system he's gone for here with the pawns on these squares instead of going g6 is pretty good for white, I would say. So just move pawn to d3 here, and the setup I usually generally recommend is to go pawn to f4 and then maneuver out your knight to say f3, and or you can even go to h3 and bring it back to f2. That's also a nice knight maneuver to keep in mind. I mean, here the simple move knight to f3 would do fine. You could also play a4 here just to slow black down on the queen side a little bit. Generally in this particular opening, black's going to try and look for some counterplay on the queen side, so you could slow him down with a4. This might be an option, but at the moment he can't play b5 anyway, so I might just ignore that for now. I like putting the knight on h3 just to bring it back to f2. Also keeps his diagonal open, so anytime he does play b5, he runs into the move pawn to e5. Okay, now we want to grab some space on the king side and then start our counterplay as quickly as we possibly can. Now I could bring the knight back to f2 straight away, or I could immediately try to bring the knight into a better square, which would actually be on the square here on f4. So what I might do is start the attack immediately with the move pawn to f4 and pawn to g4, and then look at playing the move pawn to f5 and then maybe bring the knight to f4. This might be a much better way to go about this. I also have this option of playing g5. My knight's actually really well placed in supporting the g5 pawn push on h3 as well, so this is another option I'm considering, just to play g5 and then f4. Or should I start out with the move pawn to f5, but then I allow knight to e5. I go pawn to g5 in that position. It gets quite complicated, I would say. I can also go g5 and just wait on my next moves. I might do this. I go g5 first, force the knight back to e8, and then do I go f5 immediately or do I wait? If I wait, what move can I play? I can just reroute my other knight to g3, bring an extra piece to the attack. This seems like a very natural way to play this position as well. Okay, I might do that. I might just reroute this knight. So often if you know the queen side attack is coming, you can reroute your pieces here towards the king side to prepare your attack. Now is it the time to play this move? I think so. I think we play f5 because he's moved his bishop away from the defense of the pawn here on e6. So it looked like a perfect time to play it. Now, generally speaking, it's really good to have a pawn on f6. So I would generally recommend you try and get the pawn to f6 there, but then I allow a trade of bishops, and I'm not sure this trade is something I want to allow. I also know that a knight on f5 is a very, very strong piece, so both of these options look very, very appealing to me. Just not sure which one would be the best one. So if I go pawn takes, bishop takes, we go king takes. I mean, f6 is coming next. It's very, very hard to stop f6. If I take it, okay, let's take. I like I like capturing here as well, just because it keeps my bishop here. I don't want to trade off the fianchettoed bishops just yet, but maybe it was another option. We can have a look at it after the game perhaps. Because he is going to get his knight to e6, so this is one plus side for him in this position for sure, that he's able to do this. But okay, let's post our queen on g4. It's a very aggressive square here for the queen. Can bring the queen back here to g3. So I'm just trying to maneuver all my pieces towards the king side attack if I can help it. Okay, let's play bishop to e3 here. Our knight's a little bit stuck actually. I can't actually move the knight, which is a slight downside. I do want to bring it to f4, but at the same time, in order to keep pressure on g5, he has to actually keep his bishop and queen posted on these squares, and he can't keep his queen here forever. Eventually he's going to have to move his queen, and once he moves his queen, I might be able to move my knight as well after that. So he goes king h8. King h8 is a very useful move, I would say, to include, because it avoids any possible checks from the knight. But I am just going to continue my attack and just continue building the pressure. Notice I'm just bringing every single piece that I have towards the king side here. Not really interested in anything on the queen side so far. So f6. So this is my chance to capture the bishop. So if you do want to capture the bishop in this position, this is the best time to do so. I think I should grab the bishop pair while I still can, and then we can continue to put pressure here with the move rook to f1. If pawn takes, then we capture back with the knight and continue on our attack. We have a slightly better position now because of the bishop pair. And we are threatening to take here on f6, so he probably does have to take us on g5 in this position. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure building on the king side so far, and at the moment black hasn't really been able to create much counterplay on the queen side, and he hasn't been able to get this central pawn break with d5 in, because we've sort of kept an eye on it with our bishop and pawn on e4. So black really needs to get some counterplay going, maybe try to play c4 at some point, but the problem is it gets hit by d4 as well. But yeah, black needs to try something, I would say, on the queen side, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to defend. So that's what he's trying to do, is go on rook d8, which is a good move. And now d5 is coming, so I need to react to this fairly quickly. I think the best way to do so is to try and get my knight into the game, and I think the only way to get my knight into the game is to perhaps capture here on f6 and then play my queen to h4, put pressure on this f6 pawn. I play queen h4 immediately as well. This could be a possible move. I think I'll take first. The only thing I need to be worried about is a rook coming to g8, so I'm going to move my queen as soon as I can just to get out of line of that rook. Now he can play d5, but it will be met by rook takes f6, so he does have to deal with this threat on the f6 pawn first. So he goes knight g6. I think this is also the move I was expecting him to play. It's a good move. can play the move queen to h5, just keeping an eye on d5 here, which is his main counterplay in this position. And then I want to go bishop to h6. In this position, I think I have a tactic, which is knight to g5. So if takes, I can take back with the bishop. If he captures, then the rook is hanging at the end. So this little tactical idea is able to trade off a few pieces for me. Here I think I can just play bishop h6 to get the bishop out of the way. He's going to go rook g8, so I might just preemptively play the move king to h1 just to be careful that there's no threats on this long diagonal. At the moment, yeah, I just have to keep an eye on these pawn breaks and continue my pressure on f6. Yeah, so he's going for counterplay with c4, makes a lot of sense. There is a bishop reroute here, which is quite handy to know. So if you don't know this bishop reroute, you can actually bring this bishop to this square here and then put it on to c3, which is actually a very useful square because it puts pressure along this diagonal. So I might go for this plan of bringing the bishop to c3. So I think he's trying to bring the bishop to g4, but I always have a safe square here for my queen on h6 if I need it. So I think it's okay to do this. If he plays knight e5, I also have the move pawn to d4 to put pressure on this knight if I need it as well. I might need it. Okay, let's play this move. Need to watch out that my queen doesn't get trapped as well, but it should be fine. I don't see any queen traps. I have a lot of safe squares here. I can retreat. The queen has some safe squares on h6 and h4 as well, so it should be okay, I think. So rook g5. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, do we sack our queen in this position? It's very, very tempting to sack a queen. Can we sack the queen? So queen takes, pawn takes. I think we can. Can sack the queen, take here, and then we take here. The queen is being checked at the end. That's a nice tactic. Now, if he takes our rook, we take the pawn in between check, and then the king moves, and then we capture the queen on e7. We're actually threatening to make a new queen here on e8. And if he captures here on e5, then we have rook takes on f7, and we have two rooks and a bishop for the queen, so that's definitely much better for white. There's just nothing he can do here. It's just this bishop is such a dangerous piece on this diagonal, so is such a useful maneuver to remember. Just if your opponent is really weak on this diagonal, sometimes you can sort of reroute this bishop. Is a very simple remaneuver to keep in mind. And yeah, that just opened us straight for that tactic as well after d4, and he played rook g5. It was just perfect for the bishop to come into the game. Okay, so we take the rook here on f7, and now we look for some checkmates. Oh, I see a nice move in this position. It's a nice deflection move that you can play in this position. Actually, I'm sure you have many wins, but I like this move. Bishop to h3. So if the queen captures on h3, then we have the move bishop takes e5, king goes across, and then rook to f8 is made. So we can just take here on g4. Now queen captures, then we have the move bishop takes on e5. Takes, queen has to go to g7 or king g8, and then rook f8 is checkmate. This one runs into takes, and then we take check and then take the bishop. This one, I can defend the rook. I can also just take the bishop. Okay, that was a very interesting game. So let's have a look at that game. Okay, here we go. So we get a closed Sicilian with knight c3, d6, and then bishop to g2. So our opponent went for a very standard setup. So I'm guessing from the way he put his pieces, probably a Najdorf player or perhaps a Scheveningen player. They'll probably put the pieces like this. Castles. Yeah, I also like this knight h3 move just to bring the knight back if I need to. So typical ideas for white in this opening is just to launch a kingside attack as quickly as you possibly can against the black king. I was trying to use the fact that my knight was already on h3, so I wanted to play g5, f4, f5 and bring the knight into f4 right away. That's why I was sort of delaying knight to h2. Here in this position also he couldn't play the move pawn to b5 because I always have this e5 resource. Now if takes, I always take the rook in the corner, so that's why he couldn't play this, and that's why he played the move rook to b8 in this position. After this though, I start launching the pawns up the board. I'm not sure about this maneuver, but sometimes you can do this if your opponent is going to push the pawns at you anyway, so you can sort of say preemptively maneuver your knight to the king side where it helps the king side attack. So after the move knight to g3, bishop goes to b7. I launched the attack with the move pawn f5 straight away. Here I wasn't sure if pawn takes was better or knight takes was better. They both look good. If pawn takes takes here, I do have f6 coming up. I just a bit worried that my king might be a little bit weakened on this diagonal, but maybe it's also playable. But because of that, I preferred the move knight to f5. He does allow him to get the knight to the e6 square, but I thought my pieces are more active anyway. So here rook f2 and bring the rook across. He would love to play the move pawn to d5, but he just can't because the knight's hanging and there's just too many problems everywhere with the pieces, so that's why he played f6. So now's a good time to take the bishop. Now a lot of people might not want to take the bishop because the bishop looks like it's a very bad piece, and it definitely is. You don't have to take it straight away. You could sort of wait with rook a f1 as well, but then you probably have to take it on the next move anyway. But I definitely could wait a move. Maybe that might have been a little bit better. But after captures, queen captures, and then rook goes to f1. Thought this was okay. Captures. Maybe queen h4 might have been a better waiting move, but then I was still worried about knight g5 here, but maybe queen h5, it's okay, this position. I thought what I did was also okay in the game. But it's a very messy position, as you can see. The computer is still giving it roughly equal, even though it looks very difficult to play as black, I would say, because of this weakened pawn. Queen h5, and then here we have the move knight to g5. Is that the best move? Not necessarily. Like, we didn't have to play knight g5. We could have waited a little bit. Maybe computer just wants to play b3 and then maybe reroute the bishop later on, or just hold our advantage for a while. But after knight e5, it also wants to play knight g5, so it just wants to wait a little bit before forcing anything. But I didn't see anything wrong with this. The idea is that you can't take, of course, because the rook is hanging, so black has to defend. And I have the two bishops in this position, and I thought black couldn't play d5 or f5, so it looked quite pleasant for me. And here we can do the reroute of the bishop to the c3 square, knight to e5, pawn to d4. Yeah, knight g4 is probably a better move than what he played. This is what I was more worried about. And let's say after rook e2, yeah, the position is still pretty tense, but I think it's way more dangerous for black because of this diagonal, so he has to be a lot more careful than I do. But after rook g5, we have this nice sacrifice. So rook, queen takes g5, pawn takes, and pawn takes an e5. Now, he can't take the rook because we capture here on d6, and the king goes across, and then we capture the queen. The bishop is protecting the rook, and we end up with an extra piece after all that. And so that's why he went for this. But now, yeah, white has a winning position. Too many pieces on the board. So I hope you enjoyed this close Sicilian game. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all on the next game. Take care.